And public comment. Do we have anyone on?
We have Chris Conway as a attendee.
Right. Well, we're going to have him for the high school. Okay. And meeting minutes, we did not get a set out, so there's no meeting minutes.
And so, Jay, you were looking to take up the, I think you were looking to roll in the Conservation Commission piece when Charlie presents. So did you
Right.
want to roll into the debt exclusion override?
Yes. And that's going to be from Vivian.
Yes. Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you. And in regards to the debt exclusion override, we did have an opportunity to meet with the town clerk and the management, along with a few members, as well as Meg and Jay as the chair for the EFPBC. And the main purpose for the discussion was to see if there was a possibility, and for this team, for the EFPBC to consider a date change for the debt exclusion override. So originally, the debt exclusion for the Lynch Elementary School was earmarked for January 2023 as a special town election. But the request is for it to be, the request is for it to be as a dual election and to be held on Tuesday, November 8th, instead of the January timeline. Now, there are some pros and cons, as you can imagine, for this. One of the negatives would be that now we have slightly shorter time and duration to publicize and get the message about the elementary school and the need for for the replacement, and make sure to have the community support. Some of the pros, on the contrary to it, is that this does allow for the design to progress sooner, and in hopes that we will be out to bid that much sooner as well. As many of you guys are aware, we have mentioned in the past, and especially during the discussions regarding what delivery method we should take, whether we should go with a CM at risk or a design bid build, there was genuine concern over schedule and timing due to delays related to supply chain and shortages. We're hoping that by participating in the November timeline, that the design can progress sooner and be completed that much sooner, and go out to bid earlier than originally planned with a January vote. And if this will also allow for some flexibility and some time absorption within the schedule, so we'll have a little bit of schedule contingency, that in order to make the 2025 school year opening of the new Lynch Elementary School that much more feasible and possible. By having a dual election, voters who participate would receive 2 ballots, one for the state election and one for the special town election. This does not, also the November 8th does not necessarily impact in any way the MSBA Board of Approval for this project, since that one we are on schedule to be on their calendar in October 26th.
October 26th.
Yes, October 26th. So I'll pause for a moment, answer any questions or any comments, but the request here would be for a date change consideration, and if the EFPBC would be willing to approve the change in the date.
And Vivian and Jay, I'll throw up, I've drafted a motion I'll just put up here if it helps frame the conversation. This started with the town clerk. The assistant town manager, the interim town manager is on board. The chair of the select board is supportive as well. I think Vivian did a good job sort of summarizing the pros and cons. Or we're building a shorter runway. Everybody knows the project is coming. One can maybe debate how many people had January 7th on their calendars, since we didn't really set that until earlier this summer. One of the interests from the town clerk was in avoiding winter weather, although to be fair, we did this at VO. VO's debt exclusion was on January 11th. There is the risk of severe weather in the winter. And if it's combined in a dual election, I think her intuition was we're going to get a bigger turnout of voters and we're less likely to have foul weather.
And I mean, the January timeframe, there is definite concern for the weather, and that falls right within the you have 120 days from the time that the MSBA on October 27th approves the project in order for it to be fully funded and approved by the town. The January timeline isn't at the very end of it. I believe it's early February, but you're coming really relatively close. And if I do believe the town clerk and the town manager had drafted a letter stating that if the January 8th timeline doesn't work, which I'm hoping that it does, there might be some alternatives as well.
I mean, no, November 8th.
November 8th, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
The November 8th doesn't work, or if we feel that it's too soon. I don't think so, but you know your town a lot better than I will ever, that there might be some alternatives in December versus it being held in January. Geeta
Jane,
has a question.
Yeah, Geeta has a question.
You're on. Okay.
Yeah, I'm just unmuting. Yes, the memo greatly explained, and we want the great weather for no reason, more people, it would be more popular around the town. I have a couple of questions, just technicality. So November 8th would be the election, and then when would be the fall town meeting? When the article goes, would it be a joint article by the EFPBC and the select board? If I may asking the question, I think the override, can it be two types? One can be, pardon my English pronunciation, one can be a debit override, the other one can be a general override. I think we had it two types in the past. And I'm just recollecting my memory. How did we come to the juncture? Yes, for Lynch, it's going to be a debit override. And would that be something determined at the town meeting, or is it by the select board? And maybe I could roll out all my thinking here.
Can I answer the second part of that question, Jay? And maybe Meg can talk about the town meeting schedule?
Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, the two different types of overrides, a debt exclusion versus an operating, or a general override is like an operating. So Geeta, a general override, or what we call an operating override, basically is a permanent increase in taxes. So it accommodates things like escalation in wages and contracts. So teachers, fire, police that are getting paid more money, so we need to raise more money to pay them. That continues into perpetuity. So you raise the base, and then that actually literally year over year over year, we have to appropriate that money at town meeting. A debt exclusion override is different in that you're raising money for one specific purpose. We would bond the project, typically at 20 or 25 years, and then we pay that down. And when the project is over, that debt actually falls off the tax bill. So that will be happening soon with Ambrose, because that building was built in like 04 through 06. I think I just heard recently the modular classroom project we did at Ambrose in Morocco. If you remember that, Geeta, I think that's falling off the tax roll soon. So, we take on debt, and it's like paying off a mortgage, really. So that's why from the get-go, it's been assumed that it would be a debt exclusion override. But Meg should really answer your questions about town meeting schedule.
So town meeting starts on November 10th, and that's a Thursday. It'll most likely go 3 nights, so I don't know yet. The warrant hasn't been drafted yet, so I don't know what article number this will be, but it will either be the 10th or the following Monday or the following Thursday that it gets voted.
Yeah. My big picture question was, maybe Chris, I may ask a little clarification. Let's say the school project is 60,000 and the MSBA reimbursement is 40,000, let's say. So
million.
Million.
I mean, if it's 1,000, that's great.
Let's be optimistic.
Yeah. Sorry. I thought maybe I'm not too much into. So I thought for VO, the approach was the whole thing went into the override and the balance went into the building stabilization fund. Was that angle looked into? Did you get my?
No,
The
VO
building stabilization fund does not have the capability of funding a project.
No. Like for the override, let's say the school project costs whatever. It's after all the Charlie's crunching, all the contingency and whatnot, it come to 80 million. Okay, so for the VO, we went with the whole amount for the override. For the high school, if I remember correctly, only the reimbursement. Minus the reimbursement went into the override. Are those the two types of override? Am I saying it right, Chris?
So I think, Geeta, what I believe we are required to ask the voters to support the full project amount. And then as we go into the project, we start getting invoices. And then those are reviewed by Meg and Hill. They get submitted to the MSBA and we start getting reimbursement. So the consequence is as you get further along in the project, you've got some revenue sort of coming back to the project in the way of reimbursement. So you never wind up borrowing the full amount that's authorized. But my understanding is, and I believe we did this on VO and we did it on the high school, we actually had to seek voter approval for the full amount. Is that about right, Meg?
Yeah, so you always have to get approval for the full project amount. And then, as the project moves along, the town does a series of short-term borrowings based on the spending, the cash flow expenses that we expect to have. And then at the very end of the project, when it's reconciled with the MSBA, we get all the final payment and the last 5% that they hold. The town then does their final borrowing. And in most circumstances is less than, it has to be less than or equal to the amount approved. Otherwise, you have to go back to town meeting to get an additional appropriation. You do not, however, have to go back to the voters because the voters do not vote a dollar amount. They just vote this project and, the payment for this project.
Okay.
And can I add to that real quick, Geeta? If in the unimaginable consequence that, so if we're hearing what Meg is saying, this means we're going to the voters before town meeting.
Yeah.
So if it should fail in November in the state dual election, the plan would still be that we go to town meeting and we take up the project funding agreement because, once the MSBA votes the project, which is on November 26th, that clock starts running on the 120 days. So we could actually, what this really does, one of the advantages is we get a second bite at the apple. The most recent example of this is the turf at Skilling's Field, which some may remember was shot down by town meeting initially. Then we had a ballot question put forward by citizens and it passed. And then it came back to town meeting and town meeting said, well, if the voters want it, then we should just do it. And so this would be sort of the inverse, but it's a way to have one more opportunity. The goal, of course, is strong support in November.
Yeah. Okay.
And to add to that, Geeta, on a monthly basis, you do, as a town, we would work with Meg to submit the invoices that are received from both all of the subcontractors, the consultants, and the general contractor, so that you're reimbursed through the ProPay system with the MSBA on a monthly basis. So you're borrowing, yes, you might borrow the amount. You have to borrow the full amount of the project. But as Meg said, you would appropriate smaller borrows on a quarterly basis to cover the expenses.
Okay, okay, I'm done with my questions and I'll just take a pause and go from there.
Can I add something though that's related to this that's sort of important when Geeta is sort of addressing this tangentially? Every time we have a major school project in Winchester, we tell the voters what it's going to cost. We also tell them what it's going to cost them, meaning what's the impact on my tax bill. So we did that for VO, we did it for the high school, we did it for the recent McCall expansion. So Jay and I have been in touch with Beth, our interim town manager, and we're going to be, we've sort of formally come out and said some decisions are going to need to be made very quickly once we determine construction cost and project cost. The select board with management's input is going to need to make decisions on bonding term, whether it's 20 or 25 years. Our treasurer, Sheila Tracy, is going to be working with our consultants to consider likely interest rates, which is incredibly volatile right now, because that's going to factor into it. And then the other important piece, Geeta, is our reimbursement rate. We have a base reimbursement rate. I think, Andy, I don't know if Andy's on the call, but it's like
32.47 is your base reimbursement rate.
and that goes back to eligibility. So that's just a base. That doesn't include all sorts of incentive points that the team is working hard on. So we need to figure that out as well, and then do all that math, make the soup, and then kind of figure out, based on the reimbursement rate, how much do we think we're actually going to wind up bonding, and then what is that going to mean for the median value home. We'll figure it out on the basis of, you know, every $100,000 evaluation. We developed a little calculator for that previously. We might have time to do that on the project website. But that all needs to happen very, very quickly, right? Because if we're asking the voters to support the project on November 8th, they need to know what it's going to cost. And I think both the select board leadership and management understand that that's a critical path item if we're going to go in November.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Any other questions? Do we get a motion?
I'm happy to make a motion, Jay, whereas it is permitted under Mass General Law, Chapter 39, Section 10, Winchester Town Clerk and management have expressed interest in holding a dual election in November rather than a special election for the new Lynch project in January of 2023, with understanding that such a change does not negatively impact the project team and schedule and may avoid winter weather disenfranchising voters. And whereas Project OPM Hill International favors the change, the EFPBC consents to a revised debt exclusion override date of Tuesday, November 8th, 2022, in a dual election format coinciding with the state election. The state conforms to the MSBA board vote scheduled for October 26th, and the agency's restriction that only those cities and towns that have been invited by the MSBA to enter into a project scope and budget agreement should vote to authorize a project, and such vote should not occur until after the project scope and budget have been approved by the MSBA.
Get a second?
Second.
Geeta, thank you. All right, we'll do a roll call. Frank?
Sorry, aye.
All right. Lisa?
Yes.
Buzz on. Geeta. John?
Aye.
Colleen's not on. Chris? Mark?
Aye.
All right, the ayes have it. We have Todd and Colleen and Don still not on? I don't see them. Okay. All right, thank you very much. And moving on to item C, which is the fall town meeting article update from Meg. Just a short update on that.
Yeah, so Mark and I are going to work with bond counsel tomorrow, I think. We already have a draft of the language. We're going to work with him on both the debt exclusion language and the motion language. And my plan is to bring it back here on the 29th and then to have the EFPBC vote the language, the draft language, and also, you know, vote it with the giving the town management permission to continue, you know, tweaking the language so that it meets all the legal requirements. And, you know, to be able to move forward with that and have it ready by, let's see, we need it ready by September 23rd when the warrant closes.
Okay. Any questions? Nope. All right, moving on to SD submission. And that's going to be from Charlie, and you're also going to roll in the first item, which was Concom, right?
Right.
Okay.
I'll stop sharing, Charlie. You should be able to jump in.
Thank
I'm going
you.
to pay close attention tonight, Charlie, so we don't miss anything.
Right. That would be good.
And Frank, can you be sure Charlie can share?
I believe he's all set.
Okay.
I didn't want to interrupt, but from the lesson learned, I was thinking perhaps maybe the Concom meeting minutes shared with us too. But anyway, I'll sit tight.
Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Great. Let's see here. There we go. So status on the submission package is the first thing I kind of have on my agenda, which is very brief. We all know that we're working towards submitting to the MSBA on September 1, which means we have to really have all the materials together by August 30th, which is a week from tomorrow. And we will be getting a cost estimate back, we expect tomorrow. And that then will be sort of circulated to our consultants for review. We will then reconcile the two, there's two estimates coming, designer and OPM. We will then reconcile that on Thursday. And then Vivian and Andy will be able to put together the final budget number. And again, the estimate is just the construction cost. On top of that has to be layered the soft costs. So we were our construction budget at the PSR was something like 62 million. But then of course there's another, 30% on the third on top of that, which got us to the 80 million. We fully expect, oops, did I just advance my screen without wanting to?
Mark has a question too.
Right, I was going to let
Okay,
Charlie finish.
Let me, I have one last sentence. And so we expect the estimate to be higher than the last one. There's just no indications out there that it won't be. All of our projects are inflated over even where they were weeks ago, let alone months ago. So we'll just have to see where we come in, but we don't expect it to be the same. We expect it to be higher. And we don't know what to do about that. It is just the reality of the marketplace. That was it. So Mark.
What documents are the estimates based on?
They are based on schematic design drawings and narratives that were given to the estimators about 3 weeks ago.
Got it. Okay. And would you say relative to the documents that are being submitted for this package, I guess by the end of this week or beginning of next, how close were they to what we're going to see in a week or so? Level of completion.
Relatively close. In other words, a lot of what we did after giving it to the estimator was just additional details or additional sections or cleaning stuff up. So I think, in the fact of the matter, as you well know, at this level, it's still not a true takeoff, right? I mean, they're still sort of triangulating with square foot numbers. So they'll take it off, they'll see what that tells them, but they'll then square foot it against what they know the trades are coming in at. So we're not literally getting a mechanical estimate. We're getting their best guess on the mechanical system, and then what are the last 3 jobs come in and how does that compare to what we just took off? And then there's a little hocus pocus, and then they come up with a number. And hocus pocus, I mean that with all respect, because these people are really good at what they do. But it's not a literal takeoff. It's a kind of an estimation of where we are at schematic design. But the drawings are more developed, but I wouldn't say they're dramatically more developed.
Yep. All right, great. Thanks.
Yep.
Geetha, you have a question also?
I have a quick question, Charlie. I'm not touching on the contingency or not. If you may elaborate on the escalation portion of it, perhaps say when you get the estimate from the estimator, okay, they would get the construction as of 2022, and are they escalating? Can you elaborate on that? And then in added to the escalation percentage, is there an additional percentage added to account for the current ongoing situation?
So I haven't seen it and haven't talked to them, but typically they escalate either, and there's 2 rules, there's 2 kind of schools of thought. They either escalate to bid or they escalate to midpoint of construction, and it kind of depends on which estimator you get, but they most certainly do escalate. And I think that, we used to see 3%, 4% a year. I think we may be seeing something like 7% 7% a year now. But that will be in there. Then beyond that, I think they do their best to just factor where the marketplace is into the estimate. In other words, I don't think they sort of estimate it and then add something on top of that. I think they simply estimate to the best of their knowledge where the numbers are coming in now, then put on the escalation. Then, of course, there's also a robust design contingency as well.
Which one you would want, midpoint or the end of construction? Just asking.
They come, well, it's not the end. It's usually either bid or midpoint. And
Okay.
And I think PM&C goes with midpoint of
Okay.
construction, which makes sense. So if you're a builder and you're trying to figure out what your bid's going to be, you're inclined not to say it costs this today. You're more inclined to say it costs this in a year, and that's what my bid is. But again, that's sort of an art too, because they're all different about how they treat it and how badly they want the job.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
So that's where we are. We're putting together that package now. And I'll talk about that again in a minute, that package, but there was a question about the process with Conservation Commission. Anything we're doing with Conservation Commission now is entirely informal, and that's really important to say. So there've been no Conservation Commission meetings, so there are no notes. We wouldn't go to Conservation Commission formally until the end of design development, which theoretically would be sometime late next spring, so spring of 2023. Anything that's happening now is as a courtesy, but the purpose of talking to Conservation Commission is to give them the heads up, let them see the project, let them give feedback now, so they aren't surprised later. So that process has been going on actually all summer. There was a regulatory presentation to town departments in May, and that was the first time that the civil engineer really talked to Concom. There was then a sort of correspondence, at which point in June, at which point the Conservation Commission asked for a preliminary riverfront analysis that was submitted in June. Response comments were received back from one of the Conservation Commission commissioners in July, and an updated submission was submitted last week of that analysis. And they've tentatively scheduled an informational meeting on September 13th with the commission. That will be purely informational. It will not be a formal hearing. It will just be a chat with them. And as I said, if the project passes, then we would start to talk about site permitting. But the fact of the matter is you really can't go to Conservation Commission without adequate drainage calcs and the like. So this is really just so that they know what's going on and they're being kept in the loop. So that's really just a summary of where we are with that interaction with Conservation Commission.
So, Meg, you may ask, but in my curiosity, I guess whatever the riverfront analysis that was sort of, given to them and whatnot, is it something we could be exposed to so that, on the side that we can know as if perhaps maybe they have asked it? Wouldn't that be a critical juncture to come to some kind of an agreement? Then when we submit in whatever, the 100% DD, then we would all be good. Is that the flood analysis is going to determine the whole procedure? We don't think so.
Well, it's not a flood analysis. It's more of a analysis of encroachment into the riverfront at this point. So, and in fact, and what the point of it is to show that we're actually decreasing the amount of pervious material. And so we're improving the condition. Yeah, I would think that could, through Jay, that could be distributed, Jay, as you wish.
Just a general observation, with the typical day-to-day rain, the field gets flooded, so.
Right. So we're not building in that floodplain.
We are not building, but we are, making alterations and whatnot. So I guess what I'm trying to echo here is with all the, grading changes and whatnot, would there be anything won't be graded in the direction of the field? Would it be always to, directed in the opposite direction? And then the riverfront analysis perhaps may be tied to what is happening on the upland side. That's, isn't it something connected to how the Horn Pond is going to behave and, discharge towards the downstream and then come and dictate the so-called the riverfront that you are sort of maybe saying?
I'm not a civil engineer. I don't believe that there is an analysis. This is not a flood analysis. This is a simple Conservation Commission submission, right? So it's not dealing with flooding. It's dealing with encroachment on a 100-year buffer, a 100-foot buffer, and a 200-foot buffer, which is what the Conservation Commission's jurisdiction is. So I think that's the main kind of principal sort of focus of it, which is, well, what's the encroachment into the 200-foot Riverfront Act? And what is the encroachment into the 100-foot Conservation Commission setback, which are both under the jurisdiction of Conservation Commission. So I think that's really the point of it. And that would be what would fall under the auspices of Conservation Commission.
So may I rephrase the question then? Where are we pulling the 100-foot riverfront? Where's the reference coming from? I know
the lines are based on botanist flagging in a survey. Which is typical for.
So when you say 100-year flood elevation, right?
No. I'm not talking about flood elevations here. I'm talking about a literal setback.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about. That's what the riverfront setback is, and that's what a Conservation Commission setback is a buffer zone, right? So it's not a floodplain thing. It's a floodplain would be. It's not a floodplain exercise. It's a Conservation Commission setback exercise.
Yeah, it's distant from the resource.
Mm-hmm. In the
Right,
past, you said we have pulled 100-year flood elevation, 500-year flood elevation. So where are those lines are coming from? I know lately the regulations are changing.
Those are on the FEMA maps.
Correct. So lately the FEMA maps have been updated, Meg, from day and night. Now everybody's geared up for not just designing for sustainability or resilient. Even FEMA maps rules are changing. In the past, yes, we just say FEMA map and pull the 100-year elevation. To the best of my recollection, it's not pulling it from the FEMA map. I think I'm not on top of that, but aren't those guidelines are changing too, how we pull the numbers? So that's what I was asking, Meg. If we say FEMA map.
Our FEMA maps aren't going to change until we complete the Morocco flood mitigation project. And then those, the maps will be redrawn. And, when they're redrawn, they'll take into consideration all the improvements that we made and all climate issues, but they have not right now. They have, they are maps that are in existence, or the maps that would have to be used. And I don't know what else you could do. You can't imagine where the line is going to be or what the elevation is going to be, right? That would be
correct.
Yeah.
All right, I'll just pause, maybe through Jay, whatever submitted to the Concom, if we can sort of see the copy of it on the sideline would be helpful, but we'll slowly get to the point, but all right, thank you.
Yes, we will distribute everything.
So that's that. And then the next thing we were going to talk briefly about was sustainable design scope and what is currently in the estimate. And this is something there's been a lot of back and forth with the sustainability subcommittee about scope. What we currently are carrying in the cost estimate is 6 EV charging stations that are active on site. In 6 EV ready locations on site. So what we have right now is 12 locations. And I know this has been a conversation with the Sustainability Subcommittee, and there's an interest in sort of nailing this down relative to the cost estimate, which is fine, although to some degree, the cost estimate does have some, as I said, there'll be a robust design contingency there. So some things can be covered. We don't have to be absolutely surgically precise here about this, but it's useful to know. And then in terms of PV panels, as we've reported and related to the Sustainability Subcommittee, we are going to carry 1,700 square feet, which is very modest, but a 1,700 square foot array within the base estimate. So the day the building opened, if no other PVs were added or no other PVs were even considered by PPA, we would have 1,700 square feet. And the reason for that is to ensure that we get the 14 lead points for the energy credit, which is required for the all-important 2 percentage points that the MSBA gives for sustainability, for sustainable design, for green design, which was mentioned earlier. And so we want to get those points. So we want to make absolutely, so this is an insurance policy to make sure we get that. It's about 5% of the annual consumption of the building is what's calculated by our consultants. So it's not a huge, it's not a giant step forward in terms of reducing energy use, but it does get us those points which you want. So we're proposing that as part of the base contract. So those are the 2 components of what's in the design right now, which is in the estimate. Chris and Mark have their hands raised.
Jay, can I weigh in?
Yes, please.
So we had our Sustainability Subcommittee meeting, I guess a week ago, and I'm glad Mark Scott's with us tonight. I'm sorry, Colleen or Todd are not, but it was a good discussion. Magda Lalick, our sustainability consultant, I think did a great job leading us through discussion on a number of points. One of the things that really became clear is that when it comes to, I guess I'd like to take this in reverse order, a few comments about solar arrays. On the one hand, we can certainly seek a minimum amount to reach our lead points. It still preserves significant square footage, either on the roof or elsewhere on the site through canopies, that we could seek to develop solar arrays through a power purchase agreement, which is what we have at the high school and at VO. There was a meeting that Ken Pruitt, our sustainability director, set up with a contractor also about a weekish ago. The solar, sort of a competitor to Select, not particularly interested in this project because it's frankly not big enough for them. And we got some confirmation that should we wish to pursue canopies on the site, perhaps in the parking lot, that the actual design and construction of the structural canopy itself can be kind of rolled into the cost of the power purchase agreement. So that was helpful to hear. And so I think our subcommittee was pleased to be kind of reassured, and everything I say, I'm gonna ask Mark to confirm, because during much of the meeting, I was bouncing between Small World and Peter Pan and Fantasyland last week. So lots of noise in the background, but I think we were reassured that we could almost pursue a hybrid, that is solar array infrastructure that we own as part of the project versus infrastructure that we could pursue shortly after opening or subsequent to bidding through a power purchase agreement. The other point, I wanted to ask Charlie just to clarify this. On the Vincent Owen project, which was also a TAP A project, the EFPBC was really kind of pushing our energy management coordinator for some design criteria on solar panels. So would they be mechanically fastened? Would they be ballasted? If ballasted, how many pounds per square foot? And we had some challenges getting that information in a timely way. So at the last minute, the structural engineer, who I believe is the same engineer we have on this Lynch project, made a decision to basically increase the dead load calculations for the classroom wing at VO by, I think, 10% to accommodate some sort of future solar array. But the engineer only did that in those instances and not in our larger assembly spaces, because those are more of long span structures. So that's more expensive to make that kind of allowance. And then of course, 3 or 4 years later, when we pursued a PPA with Select, there was great interest on the town side in putting solar panels all over the roof of VO, but we were unable to do that. We could only go after the classroom wings. So a question I wanted to ask Charlie before I move on to a comment about charging stations is, given where we are in the project, is your engineer making an allowance, Charlie, to add some additional allowance for dead load for panels, particularly in those larger roofs like the gymnasium, that may be more of a long span approach? Because I would hate for us to get to a point in the project and we find that there's some doubt as to the structural integrity to accommodate the load.
So I think what's really germane here is that our cost estimator is, because
Right.
The structural engineer hasn't in fact designed anything truly, right?
Yeah.
They estimate tonnage at this level. And they do diagrammatic drawings that sort of show intent, but they haven't really designed anything at all. So we need to confirm with our estimators this week that they've allowed for that kind of tonnage increase, which I will do and make sure it happens. I believe we have, but I will confirm it.
And then my only other comment then with respect to charging stations, I had made a suggestion to the subcommittee. One of the things that Ken Pruitt recommended, which I think is a really good idea, is that we don't coalesce EV charging in one area on the site, that we have at least two areas, two fields, if you will, maybe east and west or something of that nature. And so I had suggested that we give direction to Charlie. And so this is a timeliness issue because we're obviously putting together the estimate. I had suggested between 6 to 8 EV charging spaces, meaning parking spaces, in two fields each. So 6 to 8 on one side of the site, 6 to 8 on the other. Charlie, I was curious, do you, looking at this line here, is your estimator focused on number of charging stations or number of spaces? And in other words, the issue is, because then it triggers the question, are these single point chargers or are they dual chargers? If you have a dual charger, you put it right on the line and you can actually support 2 different parking spaces at once.
I don't truly know the answer. I kind of think they do it based on spaces, but I'm not 100% sure. I mean, the fact of the matter is, the dual one kind of costs twice as much as a single one, sort of. I mean, not quite, because you save on certain stuff like foundations and all
Pedestal
that.
and everything, yeah.
I suspect Jay, how do you price it? I would assume you sort of price it as of space.
The funny thing about the duals also, the wiring is one set of wires for the dual versus 2 sets if you did them separately. So there's a lot all the way down. If you can keep them duals, it's much more efficient.
Yeah, so I would assume there would be an economy of scale. I'm only asking the question, Charlie, because your note says schematic includes 6 charging stations. And I'm assuming
so that's the space.
That means 6 spaces.
Correct.
Okay. So, my suggestion to the committee would be that we ask TAP A to include, 2 fields of EV spaces with chargers, 6 spaces each. Now that's more than what he has in the estimate right now. Our subcommittee did talk at length about the prospect for conduit, for future expansion, which I think is something we're very interested in. But my sense is that the contingent, without getting really into the weeds about how much conduit and where would it go, which is sort of premature given where we are in the project, that's something that the contingency could support. I've been talking a long time, so I should shut up and sort of yield to Mark because he was in on that meeting.
And yeah, Mark.
Yeah, I don't have. Sorry, I tore my mic out of my ears here. I don't have anything to add on the PV. I think I agree with Chris that we should make sure that if possible, we're pricing 2 locations and that's how they document it in the schematic estimate or this pre-schematic estimate. On the roof PV, I would definitely strongly recommend that we at least make sure that we have an allowance for the weight of a ballasted PV system on the roof or the capacity for it. And just as I would of course defer to your structural engineer, but just for reference on a previous recent project, our structural engineer allowed for 25 pounds per square foot across the roof surface of the building. The loading actually came out to be about 15 pounds per square foot ultimately when it was all built. But I know that at this level that then has to be translated into pounds of steel per square foot for the building, and then that's going to be some tonnage number. But certainly something I would recommend, because for closing, regardless of whether we do 1,700 square feet of PV or 17,000 square feet of PV, the school should be able to accommodate it. Because at some point in the future, the town really will want to do it.
Yep, totally understand.
Okay.
Are there charging stations coming off of light poles? I have seen it at some locations.
No, there is a question though that possibly that some could come off the transformer and be installed by Eversource, but that's down the road rather than coming out of the building. There's a
Like
program.
light poles, under the base of the light
Yeah.
poles? No? Okay. I
Melrose
have
is doing that. They have a pilot program doing that, but I don't know.
Yeah,
how it's
I've
working
seen
out.
couple, but I don't know how it
Yeah.
works, but okay.
So Jay, I would be, so that Charlie can move on to the design piece. I'm happy to make a motion. It's totally on the fly though, that we direct TAP A and the estimators to include in the base scope estimate 12 EV charging spaces to be supported by 6 dual port rapid chargers.
Rapid? That's
Rapid has a pretty
you have big hefty install.
hefty install fee because of the power requirements.
So then I withdraw, I delete the word rapid. This is a little bit outside my wheelhouse. Dual port chargers, I guess is the right word. So 12 EV parking spaces distributed in 2 different fields supported by dual port chargers.
You're gonna roll the solar into that also, so it's all in one? Or?
Yeah, I'd like to add to that motion that the structural engineer should provide a sufficient allowance for approximately 25 pounds per square foot of loading for PV across the roof of the building.
For a ballasted system.
For a ballasted system.
Call that a joint motion from Mr. Scott and Mr. Nixon. That sounds good to me.
All right, do we have a second?
Second, oh, sorry.
That's okay. Keitha can have it.
All right. Geetha, Frank?
Aye.
Geetha, John?
Aye.
Lisa?
Yes.
Right, calling that on, Chris, Mark. That's it, I'm in favor.
How do you vote, Jay?
I'm all for it.
Good. The electrical contractor supports it. It's good to know.
All right.
You got a lot of
So-
experience in this, Jay.
Got so much, I mean, yeah. Okay, design massing from Charlie.
Okay, so, well, I'm gonna do one more thing, forgive me, before I go to that, which is just to walk everybody through the submission that's coming up. And we kind of did that at the last meeting, so I'm not gonna take a lot of time, but this is kind of I think we kind of talked through this, so I don't think I need to spend time on it. I'm just reminding you that this is what we're working towards for the September 1 submission. And it includes a lot of text and a lot of documents. It'll include sort of renderings that you've seen in narratives. It will include systems narratives for all the kind of engineering trades. It will talk, we've talked about Concom. It will talk about sort of permitting requirements and analysis of that. It will talk about code compliance and accessibility compliance. It will talk about, of course, it will have a significant section on cost. And then project schedule will be submitted. The designer's work plan is in there. And then various supporting documents. We do room data sheets in almost every room. We have submitted to the Mass Historic a project notification form, which is required by the MSBA. And then under separate cover, we submit to the MSBA drawings and an outline spec. So that's just gives you a sense of what we're going to be submitting when we do submit in another 10 days. In terms of design, you've seen this site plan so many times, I hesitate to show it again. However, there has been one change that I wanted to mention, which is we have narrowed the parking lot on the east side to pull it further. This is apropos of the conversation about Concom, to pull this pavement further out of the buffer zone. And we have moved those spaces. There's no net loss. We've moved those spaces over to the southern portion of the site. So no change in parking spaces, however, a little bit of a minor change in location of parking spots. Otherwise, I think this site plan is entirely consistent with what you've seen previously. We have started to do some updated renderings in part for this submission. One of the things on that list you just saw, the MSBA wants a context image. So we're trying to put the building into context so they can see kind of what it looks like in the neighborhood. And this is one of their requirements, which makes sense. So this is one kind of view of it, which is more of a straight plan aerial, but then here's another one that kind of shows it in the larger context. So that's kind of neat.
It is.
It shows the soccer fields and shows the pond and it shows all the buildings and it shows this kind of green sward down here. And what is this huge thing with the giant parking lot on the left?
Power station.
It's a
Yeah.
power station. Okay. Power shouldn't be an issue then.
Yeah, well, you would think.
Wrong. Yeah, different town though, but you would think.
Well,
It's
I
Eversource.
saw a rain garden, Charlie. Where would it be? The purple one?
the rain
Reach-
garden?
How do you, I forgot my term, how do you call it, the, where you, what is that you said, that you would be recharging in that area? Did we say rain garden or how do you
Yeah,
call it?
yeah, so there are rain gardens shown here,
Yeah.
here.
Mhm.
And then beyond that, there's sort of underground detention in multiple locations. But we do have a couple of surface rain gardens to pick up some of the stormwater.
Okay. Do we have any percolation tests done, Charlie, with the packet going?
We
to
do. There were test pits done.
With the
Yes.
percolation test done? How it's going to,
I think we have some data on that. I don't know if they did a comprehensive perk test, but I believe we did something. I'd have to check.
yeah, to sell the idea to MSBA. Okay.
So that's kind of fun to see that in context. And then we did do some interior updates. We talked about the idea of some graphic that kind of told the story of the Lynch brothers. Those, by the way, are not the Lynch brothers. So don't get used to those guys. Those are placeholders for the Lynch brothers. But you know, the idea that you could have some image of them if we could find something, but we don't have to do that. It was just discussed as a possibility. And so that was kind of the idea. I mean, there was talk, you know, Colleen talked about having some sort of biophilia, some greenery. We could have some kind of a plant material in a sort of planter if there was any interest in having that as a science project or something. If you don't want it, that's fine too. A lot of schools say we don't want to have to deal with maintaining plants and watering them, and that's fine. She also talked about the possibility of green walls, and we have just sort of put something in there, not really as a design proposal, but as just kind of an image. That's looking back towards art, and we've started to update some of the signage and things like that. But you can see there's some greenery on that wall. We're doing a green wall right now, which is more of a kind of linear, it's very long, kind of linear green wall. We could do something like that instead of those kind of groupings. So that's to be determined, but we did hear the interest in doing something like that. So we're trying to at least put in placeholders to kind of support those ideas. And then this is another image of that kind of upper level. So these are basically just updated versions of what you've already seen. There's a cafeteria, which you'd also already seen, just with a little more detail, a little more color, taking out some of the graphics, which we didn't think we needed, but giving a sense of space and putting some people in there, which is nice. This is the kind of classroom zone. We added some tile. We've started to talk, you know, another thing that was discussed was the idea of having these sort of theme-based zones so that you could have these kind of smaller learning communities that could be identified by a theme. whether it's a element or an animal or something like that, or a color. And we haven't really developed that fully, but we've started to think about those kind of ideas and options in terms of the interior palette and how we treat it. Here is this is kind of the fifth grade, this is on the third floor with the exterior sort of space outside the window, and showing that you can really furnish these corridors and start to use them as learning environments, which would be, I think, can be really, really cool. So that's just sort of a fifth grade breakout space. So that's what we had for renderings. Again, these are all placeholders for further development, but we are trying to think about some of those things. And a lot of these renderings do end up in the MSBA submission, but we'll keep working on them even after the submission, with the idea that this stuff becomes part of the selling of the project in the next 2 months here, which we're now going to pursue more aggressively. So, we want to have nice renderings and nice images. So we'll keep working on them. So that's what I have.
Any questions? No? All right, next on the agenda is an update from Chris Conway. Can we elevate Chris? Here we go. Oh.
Sorry, working on it.
Okay.
And Frank, can you elevate Todd? Todd has joined us in the public pool too. Can you elevate Todd?
Will do. All set.
Hey, Chris.
Good
Welcome.
evening. So updates from the high school. The subgroup has been working with Consigli and all of theirs through council for implementing an ongoing maintenance and inspection of the rooftop units regarding the leakage and all that. But we did have some development surface last week that has unfortunately put that on a little bit of the back burner for a bit. We had a pretty significant, probably global issue really start to rear its ugly head last week. We have spoken to Consigli about it and had their senior MEP manager out along with a rep from Amonte last Wednesday. We spent about 3 hours on the roof walking and looking at the issue. Waiting for a response back from them right now. I was going to give them a week and then we'll reach out to Consigli if we don't hear anything back. I would expect that it'll go council to council, but I may get a tip off that that's coming, but I have not yet. So I think that's about it. Unfortunately, it is a little bit of a significant issue that we're working with, again, in the rooftop units. And hopefully, once we get something from Consigli, we'll have a better feel for what direction that's going to go in. Mark, I see you had a question on it.
Yeah, just can you explain in any level of detail what the specific issue is?
Yeah, I can. We've seen what appear to be overpressurization failures or structural failures of the units in 5 units, I believe, right now. DOAS is 1, 3, 4, ERU 1, and AHU 6, I believe. And it's not a great situation, but the sort of short version of it is the internal demising walls inside that create the air paths are coming apart. And in one case right now, it's pretty significant. And in several cases, it's significant. In one case, it's particularly more serious due to the fact that there's a lot of mechanical equipment mounted to that wall. I did not, like I said, I spent about 3 hours on the roof with Consigli and an Amati rep. And I didn't get much of an indication from them, which I would have expected, which is sort of the way I expected it would go. I suspect they wanted to go back to their offices and beat it around a while before they present anything to the town. So I had made repairs to one unit and had planned to make repairs to a second until third, fourth, and fifth surface. And once that did, it sort of took over our, subgroup meeting that was last Monday. And then I drafted an email to council. They sent it off to Consigli and all. And that sort of got the ball rolling at that point.
So it sounds like you don't know if it's a failure within the equipment, or it's a balancing, or it's some combination of the two, but
on the surface, it looks like an overpressurization issue. There is there are some controls that were not installed correctly that is in the mix, along with these units run at a very high static pressure, much higher than I've seen in units before. And in one of the areas that the failure is happening, it's impinging on a non-pressurized area and creating a more significant problem in that area. And that's the area that we've told them is the most significant, in my opinion, is the most significant and most serious, where we need the first response. But I think it likely is a combination of several factors. I don't think the equipment is holding up as well as we would have liked. I think some of the control issues that were discovered may have prevented an overpressure situation, but are not currently capable of doing that. And I don't have enough to be factual, but I think there are several contributing factors that are in it.
Is there any danger that some or all of the high school won't be able to run this fall?
Danger? I don't think so. I think this is a very timely issue that needs a response pretty quickly. So I thought it was sort of fair and reasonable to give Consigli a week to formulate. But I think if we haven't heard back from them by Wednesday, which would be a week from their visit, then we'll reach out. Either I'll reach out direct, or we'll reach out to council.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah,
It's a gift that keeps on giving.
That's right.
it is.
Any
Very
other questions
frustrating.
on the high school? No.
I don't know, things looks scary, Jay. What do you think?
No, we'll wait to hear from what they have to say, I guess. I
All
wouldn't
right.
mind them replacing all those units, that's for sure.
Mhm,
Good.
mhm.
Jay, can I ask
Logistically,
Chris,
that would be
how did we uncover this? How did it,
Okay.
Right.
was there a canary in the coal mine, Chris?
me. I heard it. I think the first indication was I was on the roof and heard a lot of air noise that I shouldn't have been hearing. And that got me started on the first one, the one that we actually made the repairs to a couple weeks ago. So the excessive air noise was basically as I said, the interior wall has failed and was allowing air to short circuit, coming right out of the supply and looping right back into the suction and just making a loop. So we were having some interesting readings coming from another unit. So I went and went to go into the control compartment, which is a non-airflow. I mean, you know, I think most of you know, these units are the size of a tractor trailer. So
Right.
they're not small. And this compartment is really an operational compartment. You know, controls are in there, compressors. And when I went to open the door, I about got knocked across the roof. So that compartment shouldn't have been under pressure. So I went looking for what the cause of the pressurization was. And that's when I found what I believe right now to be the most significant failure, and had reached out to our internal sub team there and on Friday, and said that I wanted to basically hijack the meeting schedule for Monday for that topic. And that's kind of how we got to where we are now.
So Chris, I appreciate that. So then I guess I have a follow-up. That's because it was an MSBA project, there's commissioning that's required. When you mention these units are running at a higher static pressure than what your typical experience is that by design, or is that in and of itself a red flag?
The units do run. I actually had questioned it with the equipment manufacturer's rep a few years ago, and had sent him readings I was getting off of one of the units that failed. And he actually had come back and said that they were rated for several inches higher than what we were running at.
Okay.
But I mean, these units just upstream of the downstream of the fan on the highest pressure side can be running at 6 or 7 inches of water, and that's a pretty high pressure for a box, for just a bunch of walls. And that's so I think it's in the design of the equipment. And this equipment with the energy wheels and the desiccant wheels, there's a lot of pressure gradient, a lot of steps from when the air front leaves the fan till it leaves the unit. So by design, it has to be running pretty high coming off the fan to be able to handle all of those additional steps that happen thereafter before it ever enters the building. Mm-hmm. And then it's got 3 floors of building to go through to get flow out to the farthest point on the lowest floor. So yeah, I mean, by design, they do run at a much higher pressure with the energy wheel and with the desiccant wheel and all that. And these are DOAS units, so they're not getting the benefit of any recirculating air. It's coming in and going out. So they're both working, both exhaust and supply are working pretty hard.
Got it. All right, thank you, Chris.
Yeah.
Anyone else have questions on the high school for Chris?
Continuous video recording might come handy for us for all what Chris is explaining to us. I don't know. I'm just timelining all this, so I don't know.
I mean, I've documented it with lots of pictures and videos and, official communications that have gone out through council to Consigli's council and, all of those underneath them. We have a pretty good history of it. It's just, it did not appear to be a global problem until it did just recently. I believe there was one issue that predated me, maybe 2, that had some level of repair made to them, maybe during startup. And one of those repairs had failed. And so it's just sort of like it really did come to a head about 2 weeks ago, 2 Fridays ago, where and then I went through and checked all of the units on the high roof, on the main educational buildings, DOAS 1, 2, 3, and 4, and went through them all looking for additional problems. Did find one unit that had some additional problems in its infancy at this point, but not there. And all of that was shown to Consigli and Amati when they came on last Wednesday.
You wonder, Chris, if this all goes back to the original not craning those and rigging those correctly.
I think, Jay, honestly, I think there's a lot of variables that it goes back to. I think that is absolutely in the mix. But I know they don't or defend that wasn't the case. But honestly, I try not to pass too much judgment here until we have have their review of it. But the controls issues have been more frustrating for me because, if it was an overpressurization, and not just either inherent in the structural design or something else, the controls not being correctly installed would not have been there as a protector of the equipment. They're there, they're just not correctly installed. And I corrected one of them, again, on the unit that I made the repairs to, but then once it showed itself more globally, I haven't made any changes. And I'd actually like to do that sooner rather than later if they're not going to, but I don't want to change anything until we have a more formal response from all.
Chris, can I just go back to a comment you made that caught my attention and as an answer to Mark's question about the start of school? Are you concerned with the fact that we've got kids coming in? Well, actually, we have kids coming in for athletics now, but within a couple of weeks. Is there anything that you think?
I'm not right now. I would really like to see some progress, but I do realize that we have to give them some time to formulate a response. And if we were a few months into this, I would think we would need to do something more, but I think we do need to give them a little bit of a time to formulate a response. But if that response is not forthcoming very quickly, then I think we will need to take some steps similar to the steps I've already taken in one unit to protect the units moving forward, so that we'll have them.
Right. Obviously, air exchange is pretty important for us right now,
Yep.
given everything else. So, okay, we can talk offline.
Sure.
I just wanted to clarify for the viewing public, who may include parents of high school kids.
No, I mean, I'm very on top of it. It's just.
Oh, I don't doubt that.
It's because of the global implications to it. I think they need to, I expect that they will want to tread lightly and definitively as they go through this. So I would have been shocked if they came back with an answer on Thursday. I think I really would have, and I would have been concerned about it if they came back, unless they said they were replacing 13 units, and then that would have been great. But I did expect that they would take some time to get all their ducks in a row before responding.
Got it.
And Chris, last question for me.
Yeah.
Was there anything, I mean, it sounds like what you discovered you think is the accumulation of overpressurization potentially over a long period of time. Was there anything recently that like changed in the operation of the building or summer operation or anything like that?
No, but there are things that can negatively impact the units, like a fire or smoke damper shutting quickly,
right,
like from a smoke detector going off,
yep,
and all of a sudden, or a power outage, partial power outage, something that has a very rapid impact to the output of the unit. And the unit, if it doesn't shut down as equally fast, there's a whole lot of air that doesn't have anywhere to go. Right. And if the controls are not operating as they should, then that protection may not be in place. So I don't know. Some of these have been around for a bit. Right. You know, the issues, you know, the rep from Consigli made the comment, and one of them, it almost looked like it was started up before the sealant was dry. I don't think that would have been the case, but it does look like that when you look at this sealant that's separating these walls or sealing these two wall separations. We went through, of the 13 units, we went through 12 of them, and you know, in pretty good depth. Not looking at every square inch, but looking at pretty much every compartment, looking for any problems. And I think though all the ones that I had previously identified were all the ones that we identified. I don't think we found any more. But you know, like I said, it's either 6 or 7 is the grand total. of the 13, and 3 of the 4 are the DOAS units. But to reiterate, I think for the questions that have been asked, I think we're okay going into the school year. I just want to get this dealt with before it gets worse. And these units, especially the DOAS units, they run very hard. You know, they're not getting the benefit of any mixed air. So all of the air that goes into these classrooms is one time through. So we're moving a significant amount of air across the board, you know, hundreds of thousands of cubic feet per minute when you add up all the units in the building. So there's quite a lot moving.
Mhm.
Thanks, Chris.
Yep.
Anyone else for Chris? All right, next meeting dates are the 29th, and we're holding the September 12th still. We'll have an update on that on the 29th. Any questions for anyone?
We didn't have any payments or authorizations, right?
No,
From-
no payments, right? Sorry.
The next
over that.
meeting, though, on the 29th, there will be a vote for the submission to the MSBA. So attendance will be crucial in order to have a quorum.
Sort of a similar procedural vote, right, Vivian, to what we did for
Yes.
the PDP and the PSR.
Yes, correct.
And do you, before we go tonight, Vivian, do you have a sense, given our goal is to really bring into focus by towards the end of September, maybe not the last day of September, maybe end of the 3rd week, what this project is going to cost the average taxpayer? Reimbursement rate's a key part of that. Do you have a sense of when you can help us bring that into focus beyond our base rate for reimbursement?
Our base,
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, our base rate is of the 32.47. I can't be certain just yet until we make the submission to the MSBA and what additional additional incentive points for which the district may be eligible for. Unfortunately, a lot of it is very much at MSBA's final determination and discretion, but I do anticipate, as Charlie mentioned, since we are going for green buildings, so we should at least have the additional 2%, bringing it up to 34%. I'm hoping closer to a 35% of eligible reimbursement rate. And in hopes that by the end of September, is very much like in line with the 3rd week, as you mentioned, we should have a clear sense of what our reimbursement rate will be, as well as what MSBA will be contributing towards the project and what the town's portion will be.
May I
That's
Sorry.
a crucial piece of it. Thank you.
Yeah, no, sure. Gita, you had a question?
Yeah, may I ask a quick question? With our date of submission, and what date is that, the official date to MSBA, please?
We submit to the MSBA on September 1st.
Okay,
But prior of our submission is on September 1st and our board vote is October 26th. But in between, there will be several meetings held with the MSBA, in particular around the project scope and budget agreement, to outline, to make sure everything that is necessary for the project is included. So I anticipate several conversations revolving around finances.
I see. So October 4th is the warrant article due to the town. So in my mind, between September 1st and October 4th, are there any official established date meeting between, you guys and the MSBA?
Not official ones. There will be, once we submit on September 1st, they will have a little bit of time to review. They'll come back to us with questions and seeking meetings, more of kind of giving us maybe a couple of days notice to get the team geared for a meeting, but not one that's already set in advance.
Okay.
They will give us a date after the September timeline when we submit, for when we would start to have the presentation to the MSBA prior to the board vote, but we don't have that specific date just yet.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
So with that, Jay, I'm happy to make a motion to adjourn
All right, so-
7:24.
Second?
Second.
Thank you, Mike. All right, Frank,
Aye.
Lisa,
Yes.
Etha,
Aye.
John? And Mark, we have, and Don, and I in favor, so we're
Todd.
set.
Todd, just call Todd.
I did not, I forgot he was in. Todd?
Aye. Aye.
Thank you, Todd, sorry. All right. Have a nice night, everyone.
Have a nice
Good
night.
night.
See you
Next week.
Good night.
see you
everybody.
next
Thank
week.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.